This meeting is being recorded.
Great to meet you all. I'm Melinda Salazar, another one of the co-directors working with Dave in the Truth Telling Project and our program, the Grassroots Reparations Campaign. Want to take it over, Keon? Keep
Sure. I
introducing.
want to maybe Keon can say something, and then I can say a little something. Keon is a member of our Truth Telling Board and is in the lead for the Radical Truth Teller Award, and we just appreciate you for that. Do you want me to say something? You want to say something, Keon? And then
I just want to introduce myself. Hello, I'm Keon Furness. As Dave mentioned, I'm part of the team here and on the board, and I help coordinate the Radical Truth Teller with a number of our peers here. We're excited to hear from you, Amber, and we look forward to hearing more about the great and outstanding work that you're doing.
All right. And let me just say a little bit about the Radical Truth Teller Award. Part of this award is to support activists and who basically not only tell the truth but live it in their daily lives. And we think that in this particular era of mistruth and of people who are supposed to represent the needs of future generations, it's urgently important that we uplift the truth, especially from impacted communities, communities of color. And this particular award for January, I think is really apropos, goes to Amber McZeal, who I've known for a little while now and have learned quite a bit about Amber. But Amber McZeal is finishing her PhD at Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is how we encountered each other. And I know that Amber is a long-time organizer. She's one of the first Color of Change organizers. And I'm sure she didn't really want me to go dig way back that deep, but she's an expat living in Oakland from New Orleans. And we all know the impact of Katrina, and particularly in this era of climate catastrophe, not just change, and the impact they have on communities of color. And Amber and I have worked, Amber was my student, but I actually learned more from Amber than I could have ever taught. And as a result, we worked together doing decolonizing the classroom workshops and collaborating in other ways. Amber's taught in our reparations course and does a lot of work around decolonizing the psyche and focuses on decoloniality, somatics, and eco-psychology. And usually each month, every month, we support an activist financially, and we encourage others to support them as well. So this entire month, we will be asking people to support Amber at whatever institution, organization, or her Venmo that she chooses, because we know this is important so the activists can have rest, do their work, and we need people in this particular moment to do their work. Amber won't be joining with video, but will be on via audio. So Amber, we just ask for you to tell us about yourself and your work. And this is a really, I don't know if it's like auspicious because it's auspicious, but today's really important. January 6th, 1-year anniversary of this insurrection on the Capitol. But I'm not asking you to talk about that, but would love for you to share about your work, your values around activism, and what's the future for you.
Wow, thank you so much, David, and Kian and the whole Truth Telling Project team. I sincerely apologize for not being able to be on video today. I'm actually doing what David mentioned. I'm in the woods right now, communing with the river and looking at trees, and I have little reception. The opportunity presented itself, and I took advantage of it graciously to get out of the city for a minute and recharge. So I first want to acknowledge my ancestors, to my mother, Madeline, and my father, Charles Rodney, without whom I couldn't do any of this. They're both ancestors now, so they walk closely with me, and they definitely guide and shape this work. It is an auspicious day, David. I'm not going to shoo that away, that, that it's January 6th, and perhaps that's some of the circular nature of this whole moment. The way that the January 6th insurrection last year is an outgrowth of the frequencies of coloniality that have been present in this country for a minute, and personally that I gained intimacy with during Katrina, which is really where I got my feet wet with organizing. Just let me know, hand signals, or just chime in if we need to segue, okay? But I'll share a little bit about that journey. Okay. So, like David mentioned, I'm a quote unquote expat from New Orleans, born in central Louisiana, and I now live in the Bay Area. I came here in 2006, January of 2006, after trying to return to New Orleans after the floodwaters in October of 2005. And that's where I really was confronted with, I was in my early 20s, I was 22. So that's when I was really confronted with what I call the ghosts of the institution, and the way that disaster capitalism, to use Ms. Klein's words, Naomi Klein's word, disaster capitalism takes over repair efforts or humanitarian efforts or Red Cross interventions or anything. There were a lot of competing forces. In hindsight, later I came to discover that Trump had a hand in that. He bought up a lot of property in the post-Katrina landscape, among other folks. But to be honest, in the spirit of radical truth, I didn't know what was happening. I really didn't. The whole process made my head spin. I did not have a critical race consciousness, because growing up in Louisiana with such a rich, grounded, dignified culture that New Orleans and central Louisiana gifted me and gifts the world, there wasn't really a need for it. I felt inoculated in a lot of ways. I like to share, my mother never looked at me and said, "Oh, look at my little racialized, marginalized baby. Isn't she adorable?" She never said that. Hence, it doesn't dominate our conversations. I didn't really need to know. And we had our own resources. We had enough, so to speak. So through the red tape, which included intentional strategies to remove New Orleanians from the city, in the form of stopping their housing payments for those whose homes were flooded, which was my case. In the face of that, I was advised by a FEMA worker to leave the city in order to keep the housing. So a friend of mine that I played music with was in the Bay Area. She invited me to come out. I said, okay, I'll do that, and continue studying music and trauma healing and figure out my life from there. And that's what I did. I landed in the Bay. I partnered with Catholic charities, a lot of arts organizations, Brava Women's Theater for the Arts, did a lot of work with Katrina survivors through performance. And like David mentioned, partnered with Color of Change before it was a national label in the organizing world. They were really relatively unknown. And I did a lot of work on the right to return because of the housing crisis that had rolled out in the wake of Katrina, where renters really didn't have any protection. Public housing was being threatened and would eventually get demolished, even though it had zero flooding. And the forced displacement was the impact. So that created a splintering, and I'm using the language that I have now because I went and got the language. So essentially, I stepped out of organizing in about 2008, 2009 to return to school to try and understand how the world was shaped and what was going on and what was informing people's decisions, especially those that created harm. So what I came to understand was that it wasn't that capital agendas, or let me be clear, exploitative capital agendas, splintered community, which created a lot of trauma, and corporate public policy, federal government partnership was mutually supportive in that effort. So what I was living with was the sort of the residue of that, or the frequency of that pain that was really unnecessary, because New Orleans people are resilient. Most coastal people who live with hurricanes are resilient. It's a rhythm of, okay, if something gets destroyed, we know how to rebuild. But if the policies prevent us from returning home, then we can't do that. We can't make repair. Just take a couple minutes and wrap up to where I am now. My interest in music and sound, and the power of sound to heal, the power, not only performance, but prayer, chanting, drum, sound frequency in general, led me to study somatic depth psychologies and really get into the science of the body, the neuroscience, the biopsychological sphere, just as another reservoir of languaging and framing to understand what's happening to us, especially as we go through change. I did encounter a great amount of racial rupture in the graduate institution I went to, which was very painful. It's still painful. I ended up moving into the Community Liberation, Indigenous, and Eco-Psychology program, where I'm finishing up my dissertation. And that's part of what I'm doing in the woods right now, is editing the final chapter 3 to send to my chair, and, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. My work centered on decolonizing maternal health care, addressing racial disparities in health outcomes, but shifting the focus from race to racism, really working to remove it from the body, and start to bring our gaze to the systems and those pressures and ideologies and attitudes that contribute to the disparate outcomes. I centered African traditional religious technologies, or ATR. Some other names for it are Ifa out of Yoruba, West Africa, which became Lukumi in the Caribbean, and Candomblé in South America, Brazil, as well as Haitian Vodou and Black liberation theologies, but really bringing in other frameworks to resurrect a life principle with regard to women, mothers, birthing people, the bodies that birth, and reverence for the children. And in a few days, I will launch. It's definitely an outgrowth of the research, which is critical consciousness. Dr. Yaba Blay, she's a beautiful professor. She's very present on Instagram, and she does critical race studies and cultural studies. But she did this video the other day, and she mentioned that, she said, we say the word white supremacy, quote unquote, but we really don't know what that means or how it stays alive. Especially if we're going to remove it from it being exclusively something that only white people can embody. That anyone who has been socialized here has been socialized to be in relationship in a particular way with themselves, with humans, with the natural world. And that the psychic realm of that, the psychology of that, is the frontier that we're now pushing in to work on, to plant some seeds of transformation there. So I'll be launching the first of a series of 5 offerings called Decolonizing the Psyche. It's all online in light of the, global pandemic, which is, blessings and burdens of the moment. But this is one of the blessings, to be able to connect globally. And let me see if I'll read to you a brief paragraph of what that is, and then just open it up for a conversation or any questions y'all might have. Decolonizing the psyche. Psyche means soul, for those who might not use that word a lot. So decolonizing the psyche is an experiential process that centers the cultivation of critical consciousness. I call it C3, coupled with embodiment practices to foster transformation. These practices are intended to disrupt patterns of coloniality embedded in the psyche and body. Decolonizing the psyche is a gesture at producing alternative concepts of being, knowing, and doing beyond the racialized and human-centric conceptions that have distorted relationships with ourselves, with each other, and with the more than human world. And I'll close by saying this, because that's, the water protectors who have been on the front lines up in the Midwest. I like to center that movement, and also the Flint, Michigan fiasco, which folks are still recovering from. That we as human beings animate systems and we make choices. And the choice in the case of Flint to dump water, or dump these toxins into the river for sake of profit, that is the place we're applying pressure. That decision right there, to see the river as a living vein, a living vessel of blood, of life fuel, that is in our body in the form of our arteries, but is also the body of the earth itself. And then making decisions from that knowing. Thank y'all so much for the nomination, and I'm happy to be in community with you.
Ashe. Thank you for sharing. We're gonna open it up for questions for folks, and I see that Keon has unmuted himself. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Your story or reality of how you are coming to be, and how you tapped into the consciousness that was all around you is just amazing. First I want to say that is my mother is descendant of New Orleans. She moved away to Los Angeles, where I was raised, in the 60s when people were migrating from the South to the West. But she stayed connected to that Katrina fiasco so that she could be connected at my then living grandparents who are now ancestors. How much, I just want to ask, how much of your family's history are you able to, or were you able to still curate and connect living structures, buildings, pictures, photo albums, things that tell the stories of who your descendants were, who your ancestors were? How much of that were you able to save during the or as a result of the Katrina floods?
Thank you for that question. So the gift is that my extended family lived in New Orleans. The hub of it is in central Louisiana called Lafayette. So everybody there was fine. Records, I mean, I'm building a genealogy tree now, so I just went all the way back to the 1600s on
Wow.
some of my family lines. We've been there that long, around all parts of the state. But I'm fortunate that from my line, through my mother, that hub was in central Louisiana.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's great.
I just want to ask a question, just in, a lot of people may not understand this language, and like, why do we have to decolonize, and what does that mean? So I mean, just for folks who are just tuning in and may watch the video later, like, what does that mean, to decolonize, number one, and how do you decolonize in a world of coloniality, or like where the systems from that emerge from the theft and all of that? Like, how do you decolonize your heart and mind and the psyche when the very essence of the system is? And that's a big ass question, so
And I have a
just curious.
follow-up. I have a question, a follow-up to that. And that is, how did who's going to remember all these questions, right? But how did the process of your research contribute to your own decolonizing your heart and mind? So those are three big ones that could be a whole nother it could be chapter 4.
Thank you both for that. They're two questions that go together. And I hope I do it justice in answering. Starting with David's, the way I understand, first of all, this language was all foreign to me. Like I said, nobody spoke like this in my family. We don't consider ourselves a part of the colonial power. It's not how most Americans talk about themselves or their identity. So one of my favorite definitions, because I always struggled, it's almost as if stepping outside of the inoculation that my elders and parents and community had created, it was like discovering race, because race was never the dominant factor. Race exists within a particular context. It's not a familial identity. It's a political one. It's not necessarily something, even though we have the reclamation and the beauty and the pride and Black power and this, that, it's not necessarily something that dominates our intimacy. So I struggled a lot. I struggled with the discovery of these systems. I struggled with the discovery of institutional structural racism. And then finding the language of coloniality, decoloniality was liberating because it was spacious. And one of my favorite definitions, I think it was Dr. Nelson Maldonado Torres said, coloniality is all about the power to distort the way a person understands and makes sense of the world. So coloniality is the power to distort the way I make sense of the world. It distorts the way I understand the river. It distorts whether the things that are unseen are valid, or am I only a materialist? Only the things I can see are valid and real. So the process of the research, first of all, was fighting the whole way. I was just in pure full-fledged warrior mode. I mean, from day one of graduate school, moving into the rise of Black Lives Matter in 2015, all of this was happening while I'm, trying to go through grad school. So there's a lot that I subconsciously and intuitively would not take on, like the projection of this is who you are less than, you are don't procure as much value, your intellect isn't as valid. All of that never made sense to me at a somatic level because it's not how I was raised. When you're raised around people who have agency and promote it in you and in the culture, there was a resistance. So to your question, David, how do we decolonize in the midst of coloniality? We have done it from day one. We've done it from day one. So the projection of non-human was always just a projection. It's not as if we believed it. Otherwise, there would not have been revolts. Otherwise, there would not have been maroon societies. Otherwise, there would not have been the agency we saw in Reconstruction to build schools not only for Black people, but for poor white people too in the United States, right? And the research, back to your second question, the research just affirmed it. One of the things I centered in the work was the story of the Abayomi doll, which is a story from Brazil. A lot of Benin and Yoruba descended folks ended up in Brazil. And the name Abayomi is a child's name, but it, like most names, it's much longer. So it's more like a prose phrase. And it translates to, in English, they tried to bury me, but didn't know I was a seed. And it gets shortened to the name Abayomi. And it's the story of how when a slave ship had docked in Bahia, there were these children exiting the ship that were inconsolable. And this, this is she was very clear. This is the myth. This is the way we tell the story now. So in the spirit of that mythos carrying on, nothing you could do, no singing, no nursing, nothing could console them. As they met the women on the shore in Bahia, those women tore these strips of their dresses. Their dresses were black cloth, and they tied it in a series of knots and made these dolls and danced the dolls around to console the children. And they were consoled. And so they called that doll the Abayomi doll. And when I heard the story visiting Brazil, and then I shared the story in circle with Black moms in the Bay Area, and I asked that we excavate. What are these stories of radical love? These stories of radical love are in every woman's home. Specifically, I was working with Black moms. So the stories of the ways our mothers transmitted radical love are immense. And it's a cultural continuum that you can look to the stories of Oshun, the river goddess from Yoruba land, who traveled into the Caribbean, into Brazil, into the United States. That there's an echoing of the same capacity for love in the face. And the fact that we carried those stories in the belly of coloniality is my answer to you, David. How do we do it in the midst of it? We've always done it. We've always been doing it. I think that the frontier now is recognizing en masse what we're doing. and why it's important in the face of, let's take a contemporary issue, CRT debates, and trying to distort the narrative of slavery and history that we're fighting right now, right?
Thank you. Just so powerful. And I want to, see if there is one more question from the audience. I have another one. But if there are folks who have, would like to ask, and I see Kwame smiling, and I wonder if, okay, you good?
Oh, no, I'm really happy to hear, Amber, I'm really happy to hear your words and everything that you're saying in the journey, the story of the journey. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for being you and to let you know that I am here with you.
Thank you so much, Kwame. I appreciate that reception.
Ashe. Are there any more questions? I have, so real quick, Amber, is there a Venmo or a place that you want to have people donate to right now? We're sending you a check, but we're just encouraging people to do direct support in this moment, and throughout the month we'll be asking people to support you as well, in whatever medium you would like, a PayPal, whatever. And maybe if you can put that in the chat, if that's possible, and I will ask one more question if that's okay with folks here. And I remember hearing about your dissertation, and is it okay? Like number one, I want to read it when you're done, but number two, I remember just being profoundly impacted by your description of working with Black women in California, and particularly around maternal health, and particularly like Black women's health, maternal health is especially an urgent issue in the midst of all of the things that's going on. And we don't talk about Black women's maternal health because that's how I got here, right? And even as a father, of a Black child with a Black mother, like realizing how that happens in the medical system. And I'd love to, if you could just say a little bit more about that work with Black women.
Sure.
Maybe after did you drop your thing in the chat, or do you want to just say what's your Venmo or something like that, or where you want us to?
Yeah, let me so I'll type this last one as I get ready for that. Okay, so the PayPal is at Amber McZeal. There you go. And then the Venmo is at Amber dash McZeal. And I'm actually I can feel the tears welling up right now. I am truly grateful for the support. As you can imagine, one of the things I encountered was a tremendous amount of grief, which turned into an invitation to learn how to tend grief right now, and also learn how my ancestors tended grief, especially as women and mothers in this colonial project, and how they maintained a reverence for life and dignity, an agency. I'm not to romanticize this at all. We all, or let me say, I hope we all know it's way more black and white than the race colonial construct would want us to believe. So there are all kinds of things mixed into there. But that was my decision, my conviction around doing this work was to not come from or speak about my ancestors' experiences from a damage-centered place. To be able to hold the tension between harm experience, but also medicine applied, and how we have continued to carry that medicine, we continue to apply it to our wounds, and given some time and space, it can only grow, it can only get stronger, that medicine that they employed and they used. So the data is not too surprising, folks. It's not too glamorous. It's really simple. It's basic. Behind what most researchers have found what's behind all of these disparate experiences and outcomes among Black women is the dismissal of their pain. The dismissal of their pain, the pathologizing of their bodies, all of which loops back to, you can trace it, it loops back to the scientific racism, the medical apartheid, the distortion, the pseudoscience distortion that was a part of the 18th and 19th century to establish race in the first place. It uncovered for me the importance of being able to see how those things, like, how they always say history is not dead, it's alive. Well, that's very real. That something in the 1830s by J. Marion Sims could still have an echo, a reverberation within institutions today is phenomenal. And you'll miss it if you're only looking at it with the materialist eye. So in the work, it became important, one, creating care ecologies. Like it's almost like we're relearning the fundamentals of care because of the ways that these racializations of who gets care and who doesn't have been socialized into us. A lot of this stuff partially is in textbooks. Most of it comes in medical rounds, medical training of OBGYN doctors, of nurses. It's in the way that the strategy of care is transmitted from the elder doctor to the student. And that is where the racialization gets transmitted as well. So it's still, especially in the conversation around reparations, that the distortion of birthing and the mortgaging of bodies, the way that the actual birthing of bodies along with the physical labor intersects capital accumulation here, capital formation here, was something that I had an intuition about it. And that, I'm going to be honest, there are still unknowns. There are still insights about it that are pre-verbal. They're so deeply related to our human experience. And race is just the cap lens that we're having to navigate it through. But it's a human phenomenon. So I see Kwame, I think, agreeing in a way.
You said pre-verbal and you just threw me out right there. I'm like, she just hit it right there.
and it takes time. And it takes time to move it from, that body knowing something that's in my body, because we are literally, our ancestors with their memories and their resilience gave us these bodies and these markers. So those memories and the resilience is there too. So another part of my discovery is the sheer genius of Black women birthing agents and birth workers in the Bay Area. There's an organization called Black Women Birthing Justice. Some of the movements that have been made to push Medi-Cal to accept, to apply to doula payments and midwife payments so that low-income mothers can now access those quote unquote alternative care services through state funds, which is amazing. And it undoes what we did to the black granny midwives, who were the only people most birthing babies in this country. And the turn at the, in the early 19th century was we denigrated their practice, we pathologized them, said they were dirty, ran whole ad campaigns, and then instituted licensure in order to concentrate more power into the hands of white male OBGYN doctors. It was the creation of the medicalized birthing field. So there's a lot of momentum and power and movement on the ground here, but there's also we're also in the heart of Silicon Valley. There are a lot of competing agendas here. Over the last 10 years, there's been great displacement. And so there's the gift of that light and that genius and that innovation coming out of Black women and mothers in the Bay Area. And there's also the increasing pressure because of our proximity to Tesla and Google and Facebook and all those folks. But we are, there is no, if you just open up the terrain and let folks tell you what they need, and listen to them, it's like we need to apply Buddhist principles to medical training, like the art of deep listening, because most women know when something's going on with their body. Serena Williams knew something's happening with my body, and I also know the treatment. So they're really simple mistakes that could be avoided without the barrier of that racial socialization influencing people's choices. And I will add this too. One of the things, a part of the funding is going toward helping me to stay in the woods for longer so that I can get some of the other writing out, which may not fit within the scope of the dissertation itself, but for other places like collaborations with the Truth Telling Project and beyond. Because there's a tremendous need to start to narrate this process in a different way, in full honor and respect for our elders and our ancestors, and building upon that groundwork. Now moving into, all right, how am I participating in perpetuating this stuff, and how do I curb it? So again, my gratitude to you all.
And we thank you for being with us for this time, and just want to offer our thanks and congratulations on this award. Like, we honor people who are doing amazing work, research and activism, and aren't acknowledged. And, knowledge production, especially decolonial knowledge production, is activism. And I'm just in awe by you and your work, your vision, and I'm glad that you are finishing the dissertation, because Melinda and I went through that and it wasn't easy. And Melinda can also speak to, this work of our bodies. She was on faculty in women's studies at University of New Hampshire, and we talked a lot about the impact of women of color, women in general, Black women, through the academic process, and just the immense amount of racism in the academy as well, which is why I'm not in the academy anymore. But just want to thank you and, close the space out and thank our ancestors for getting us to this moment and dreaming and believing in us and supporting us to be here. And thank you, Amber, for your work, and encourage people to Venmo, PayPal, join Amber's course coming up. I'm planning on joining it. I'm gonna
I
take
am registering right
and,
now.
oh, I also just sent Amber a Venmo, so send a Venmo right now too. No, just play. But support Amber. And support, when you support Amber, you support this work getting out there that needs to get out there. That's subjugated, that's we need to support this knowledge production and her work in the world, because it is a necessity. So thank you all for joining us and being here. And next month, we have every month, first Thursday of the month, we have a Radical Truth Teller Award. Please come out. Also, I want to encourage you, as soon as you get off, to hop on to Instagram, go to the Raglan page. That's my IG, and I'm doing Instagram Live about January the 6th, this anniversary, and the role of truth telling in this particular moment. So join me right now. I'll be right on around 8:05. It's 7:57 Eastern. So in about 6 minutes, I'll be going live. Please come join me at the Raglan page to hear about truth telling in January 6th. And thank you all. Remember to support Amber. Thank you, truth tellers. I'm so happy that I'm friends with and colleagues with the Radical Truth Tellers on this call, and Amber especially. So thank you all, and have a wonderful night, and see you all on IG in a few minutes.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.